I want to go delve into this one. I'm not going to extrapolate everything out of it, but I do want to mention this one little part. Where was it again? Oh, here. So this one is about undesigned coincidence. So I'm going to quote your book for a very small section. An undesigned coincidence is a notable connection between two or more accounts or texts that doesn't seem to have been planned by the person or people giving the accounts. Despite their apparent independence, the items fit together like pieces of puzzle. Hence the pieces right here in front of us. So, Mr. McGrew, so like my first question is why are undesigned coincidences so effective in proving the historicity of the New Testament?
So let me give a kind of example. This is like would be a modern made up example, but I think it will help in answering that question. Suppose that you have two different people who say that they witnessed a bank robbery. And so you're questioning them and you're trying to decide, did they just make this up or did this bank robbery really happen? And one of them says, this bank robber was ahead of me in line and I looked down and I noticed that his shoe was untied. And then he carried out the robbery. And then the other person says, tells his story of the robbery and then says, and when he ran out the door to run away, he tripped and he almost fell. And then he recovered himself and he went on and he ran away. So the person who mentions the tripping doesn't mention the shoelace, and the person who mentions the shoelace doesn't mention the tripping. So that's a kind of example of an undesigned coincidence because they don't appear to be trying to fit their information together. And so that helps you to have more confidence in both of them and believe them, because it would make sense that if there was a real bank robbery and they both saw it, then they would remember these things that would actually fit together because tripping could be explained by the untied shoelace. So that's an example. I hope people still have shoelaces nowadays. If everybody has Velcro, nobody's going to understand that example. But yes, a shoelace is the thing you use to keep your shoe on. Anyway, so that's like a modern example. So why are they so effective? Well, first of all, there's what I just alluded to, which is casualness. So that they appear to be casual. Neither one appears to be trying to say, hey, look at me. I am telling you the truth because I'm giving you this. They're just saying it as part of the story. And then the other person is just saying it as part of the story. And then you notice as the investigator that they fit together. So, for example, if John mentions that the feeding of the 5,000 took place around Passover time, he just kind of mentions it in passing. And then Mark says they had the people sit down on the green grass, and we know that the grass is green around the time of Passover. Neither one appears to be trying to bring that up to show off or confirm himself. So there's that apparent casualness. Then there's that leads to the fact that it would probably fail if you did it deliberately. It could be overlooked so easily. I had known the Bible all my life very well, but only learned about undesigned coincidences, a certain number of years ago, not very long ago. So you could just miss them. And a person who's faking something is not going to be that subtle that it could be missed. And then, what good does it do him, right? So it's not plausible that John would go, ooh, I'll mention that it was Passover, and then maybe somebody will go notice this little mention of the green grass over here in Mark, and then they'll believe me that, made up, even though I'm making up the story. That it doesn't make sense. So that's why it's so impossible to plan too. Mark could not possibly have known that John was going to come along later and mention the time of year. Mark may not have even known the time of year other than the grass was green, but not that it was around Passover. So in these ways, they just do not appear to be planned. And that gives us more confidence because reality fits together and these details fit together.
Yeah. So one thing that is very important actually to mention is when Christians put the claim forward that it's a historical account or reports of Christ, then what we need to keep in mind first off is that when you start reading, like the epistemological lens that you need to use is that you need to keep in mind that there were already thousands of Christians before one letter of the New Testament was written. Like, for instance, in Luke 1, and Luke made an orderly account for the excellent Theophilus, et cetera, et cetera. So what you need to think of is there's one person, you have like the synoptic gospels, synchron, and optic with I, the same I gospels, for instance. So the gospels are actually eyewitness testimonies. So in that particular way, people should, one of the ways should be reading the Bible, for instance. So the example or the allegory that Jesus gave just fits perfectly, like in that way of looking at it. And there are plenty of them. I would really recommend this book. I've read this one last 2 or 3 weeks when coming to this podcast, for instance. And one thing, there were one thing that really catch my attention was you really start to understand more how the writers of the New Testament, of how the apostles were thinking. So you really see them as human beings, as persons, for instance.
Right.
And that's a very important thing to emphasize.
It is important because we trust people as people, right? If you have a friend, you trust him because you know him as a person, right? And if we just think of these as sort of abstract documents, then that may not tell us why we should trust them. But when we start understanding what kind of people these men were and that they were truthful, then that gives us a reason to trust them and not to make up all of these elaborate theories that they might have been changing things or falsifying things. We're like, no, that's not what Luke was like. That's not what John was like, you know?